Hello, my name is Dan Hennon. Today's March 23rd, 2016, and I'll be doing a live update here with the latest on the David Crowley family murder case. I'll be joined here shortly by Greg Fernandez Jr., who will be calling in on the line here as well. Today, the latest update from the City Pages came out. Front page article on the David Crowley case entitled "The Final Cut: The Strange and Tragic Demise of a Minnesota Filmmaker and His Family." And that just hit the it'll hit the newsstands here tomorrow. It's on the internet here today, getting a lot of hits. The author of the article is Corey Zarowski, and I think he did a very balanced and fair look at this case. Somewhat still leading the way that I interpreted this article as more of David Crowley having delusions of grandeur, breaking with reality, not living in a reality state, getting up in over his head. And the article's basically written that he's just kind of lost touch and went off the deep end. So the article isn't at the same time agreeing with the official narrative from the investigation, but it's kind of leading down that path. It's getting it has some quotes with family, friends, neighbors, and others following the case. So it's pretty balanced as far as that's concerned. I'm going to go to three topics, points of information here on this case that weren't included in the article. Corey Zarowski's article, I think, missed a whole host of things that he could have covered, but he also covered a lot of good things as well. Now, in the parameters of what would have or what could have fit in the story, there's a mountain of information out there. So I think he had to write this article probably in the parameters of a certain word count or column length space or something to that effect. But nothing about the deleted posts on Facebook were brought up in this article, and I think that's an important piece to bring up. The posts that were deleted off of David Crowley's personal Facebook page, not brought up in the article. I think that's a very important point, as once someone dies on Facebook, for instance, they are given three options from Facebook. A family member can call and have their page of the deceased turned into a tribute page, and what that will do is basically people can send their condolences and leave information out there as far as sharing good stories and times they've had with the person. The other option is they can shut it down and delete it altogether. So what you get with that case is the page shut down and gone and actually removed. And I think the last option that there is to keep it going just the way it was, wide open. And what that will do is Facebook freezes or locks in the time of that request, and people can only post things going forward. Stories, articles, pictures, updates, whatever they want to post to the wall is basically, it's a wide open wall, not a tribute page for that person, but it's locked as far as older things cannot be updated, edited, or deleted. Now, in David Crowley's case, he had posts from his personal page deleted after his death. Now, that doesn't fall under any of the categories that Facebook offers as far as options for someone who, a user account who dies while having a live active account on Facebook. So we still think that's an important piece for the investigators to look at. Let me go to the next thing. Kate's death. Now, Kate's death wasn't involved in this article at all. As far as David Crowley's mother, Kate Crowley, died 8 months later after this death. David Crowley's mother died. There was no information on her death, no cause of death, nothing explained in the police reports, nothing in the local paper, nothing in the obituary at all. She just died, and it was strange. Now, the being the fact that she's 51 at the time and healthy, working 2 jobs and physically fit with no health ailments to note, it seems odd that she just randomly died out of the blue. The question in looking over the police reports from this case is the only person who didn't go along with the official narrative in this case with the family was his mother, Kate. She had a hard time accepting it, hard time believing the official version, and didn't really seem to buy into this whole suicide case with David, with her son David Crowley. So, what has many people questioning or creating some skepticism is why, of all the people, the only person who doubted this case winds up dead and under very suspicious circumstances. So that was not brought up, maybe not space for that in the article. Let me see if I can get Greg here back again on as well.
Hey, Dan, can you see me?
The other thing.
Can you see me or hear me? No.
Is item number 3 is the people in the house. People in the house are referring to when the case was closed, murder case was, the house was clean, for instance. The investigators cleared out the home, got the evidence, got the pictures. BCA did their testing analysis and got everything squared away. Got the information, did their fingerprint testing, removed the bodies, did the analysis and the forensic work, and then they cleared the home for others to for the crime scene really to be cleared. After that point, there was a scheduled appointment for the professional cleaners to come in on, I believe, the 20th of January, that following Monday. Hello, Greg.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you now.
All right.
Yeah, welcome, Greg. Just going over here with the listeners, the article that came out from the city pages today. And one of the things that I saw that was not in the article, and we can get your viewpoint on this then as well. I just started talking about the things that were not included. Number 1 was the deleted post off Facebook. That was, in my mind, it still is a very important piece of the case. Number 2 is Kate's death. David Crowley's mother, Kate, died under suspicious circumstances. And then I was just touching on item number 3 that wasn't in the article that I think is very important is, and I want to get your input on this. The people in the house after the house's crime scene was cleared, but before the professional cleaners began or started or even attempted to start their cleaning of this house, the folks were in the house. Now that piece also wasn't brought up in the article, and I think that's an important piece for those following. What is your viewpoint on that?
Yeah, I mean, there's just so much to it that I guess it's hard to cover everything, So that's why it's good to have people looking at it from different points, and that is probably still my biggest question. So I'm still waiting to hear back from Gummert. Haven't heard from him. I sent him a message Wednesday. So right now it's been 1 full week. So
what was the Greg? What was the contents of that question, or what was the circumstances around reaching out to Detective Gummert?
Just to ask him questions. I gave him a short list. Well, I thought it was a short list. It's 21 questions, and it just dealt with some of the questions that we still had after reading these 94 pages and going through these 464 photographs, and then looking at everything else that we've been trying to follow and keep up on for a whole year. And it's just like, okay, 1 year later, we should know a lot more. We shouldn't have to dig for these answers and try to speculate on some things just to find out what is true and what is not true. This should be a very simple case. And to me, it is a very simple case. It just comes down to the fact that, well, they the cops can't prove their theory. That's very, very simple. So that's where I've been starting.
And we have been in communication with Officer Gumbert from the beginning, and he was actually fairly easy to work with, answered our questions, and was cordial along the way. But you had very early on at the beginning asked if he would be willing to answer some questions um, on the case, and then when this whole investigation wrapped up and everything kind of shut down, you've got a basically response back from him saying police are no longer discussing the case; it's now closed. And then what you did was, I think, in a very nice way and polite way, saying you did bring up the fact that you did had a basically promised earlier to answer some questions, and then he wrote back and says, you know what, my mistake. I did promise you that I'll answer some of these questions. So what you did was forward a very fair question list that he could review. And did he say when he was going to get back to you, or at all, or just basically said that he would entertain the thought of answering some of these questions?
Yeah, he basically didn't say. I didn't ask. Maybe I should have asked to say, hey, but I figured 21 questions, and they're very, there are some questions that could be answered yes or no, but I'm hoping that many of those questions will be answered very thoroughly, and but we'll have to just wait and see. So.
Would Officer Gumbert entertain a thought of doing a conference call or a video recording, or he turned that down?
He never turned it down. He
Never did.
never really, said, well, let me think about it or anything. He just pretty much brushed off that question, just with many of the questions. And
Okay.
he didn't want to answer any of my questions until I had read the whole 94 pages and gone through these photos too, which is fair. But it was like, okay, now that I've done that, okay, now let's talk. And it's like, it's just more of me giving him 21 written questions, and then hopefully he's gonna write us back and answer those questions. So.
And they're nothing, like you said, nothing in depth, nothing inappropriate. They're just basic surface level questions that would like to get answers on, and they shouldn't have to be anything that would take a lot of his time to investigate or research or pull up. It could be many of these are just yes or no questions. So it's and how many did you have? 21.
Yep. I actually cut it down to 21.
I think that's fair. So we'll wait to hear back from him on that. The article written by Corey Zarowski that came out in the newspaper today, I think I was telling listeners when I began the broadcast, I believe it was fair, well balanced, and fair. After reading it twice, it's slanted somewhat going down the path of David Crowley having delusions of grandeur, and kind of bigger than he was. It kind of had thoughts, is how I read the article, that he kind of had a lost touch with reality to some extent. It also talks a little bit about PTSD again, which doesn't relate to a break with reality or losing touch, but it kind of, I felt it went down that road. He did a good job, I think, of interviewing friends, family, and enough outsiders to keep it fair and balanced, and including Officer Gumbert himself. So I think it was a pretty balanced article. I did get the sense it was kind of heading down, not exactly the official narrative, but kind of going down the road of David slowly losing touch and not really grasping to, almost as if being a perfectionist was also in there several paragraphs, meaning everything had to be perfect, everything had to be right on the money for this script. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, and David wrote many different lists. It did seem like he did want everything to be right, to be perfect, and that's probably why he didn't just sign over his film, back in May or even in October, I think it was, right? So
September, yeah, September the
And
2nd.
yeah, that second time too is really key, because this article makes it seem like that was also a failure too. Like, and he's probably right. It probably was, but and he doesn't speculate on that. That, oh, this, this didn't lead David down that dark path to murder his wife or murder his daughter, but it does kind of leave that door there. It does kind of leave those thoughts there that, well, okay, maybe that's possible, and that's good, because then it gives people a road to just travel on and see how far down that road goes. I don't think it goes very, very far, really, but because everything that we've seen shows that David was planning for the future. And so, and the other thing is, like, you have a lot of people who talk about the trailer, and we've talked about how the trailer has strayed so far from what David was going to do with this project. And I also think that that's key too. If there was some type of foul play or something like that, I think that's a big thing. I like the article. I thought the article was really, really good, very well thought out. I love the background that just covers in a very simple way David's background, his wife's background, kind of. I thought it was very well done.
Yeah, I agree. I think it was well done, well laid out, and also for the first time initial person following this case, it wasn't too in depth. It gave good foundation of the case. I also picked up on the fact that I got in reading the article. Is the feeling that David was rejected by these contract offers over and over again, which led him down into that depression or into that spiral. But what we've said over and again, and there's what I believe is evidence that he was the one turning down these offers. He wasn't one being rejected and leaving in an upset fashion and being depressed because things weren't going his way, but uh, he was conducting the negotiations on his terms essentially, and when it didn't come into the way that he wanted it to go, he walked, as he told his father on that text message. I walked away from it. It wasn't what I was looking to do, and we know that keeping the creative rights and ownership of the script was his of utmost importance. And a lot of these big money offer deals were involved giving that up, and I don't think that would have been a David Crowley's angle that he would have enjoyed. But that's the sense that I got. There was some discussion this past week on the Justice for David Crowley of Gray State Facebook page. The last 6 or 7 days, kind of to some extent heated, with people saying no, he got rejected, and this took its toll. And several of the members on that page are saying no, he was the one turning down these offers. He was proud. He had a pride level and didn't want to accept anything that was not on his terms. So that's a big difference. And in the whole article I read from Corey Zorowski, the feeling I got was the sense that he was rejected over and over and trying to do what he could to sell the script. And the only quote in the whole article was my own that says that David Crowley walked away from the offer. He walked. He did not get rejected. He
That's
turned
true.
them down. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that's really clear. I think you made that very clear. I don't know why people are coming up with these theories that contradict what David Crowley said, and during those times when he said them, he was looking to do something with this film. He made it very clear, I think as early as September maybe, that if he couldn't find some big film people, if he couldn't find some Hollywood studio to actually make this film the way he actually wanted to, then he was just going to do it himself. I think that's a big key. I just wish he would have done it sooner, but that's woulda, shoulda, coulda. It doesn't matter now. But
Correct. I think that the other thing that I noticed in reading the article is the way it was written is kind of shed David Crowley in a light of being a two-faced. He knew he wasn't going to get Hollywood to buy into this movie, but at the same time, he kept crawling back again and again to try to sell it to him. And what I think David Crowley was doing, and I'm no movie producer, but he had a gut feeling that the big studios in Hollywood were not going to buy this film, and he was already expected for that to fail. But he did know that it was going to get picked up or done by an independent label or an independent company or something much smaller, may or may not have been still in Hollywood, but not a top level movie production company. So I think he already knew that that wasn't going to fly, and that's a fair statement to make. Anyone pitching a movie he was delving into, the odds of that coming out from a high level big Hollywood production company is slim to none, and I think he knew that, and he was trying to pitch it. I think first of all to the big movie places.
Mm-hmm.
Couple times it didn't work. He figured that was the case, I believe, and then he was starting to pitch down to a smaller size to this producer named Jason Allen in the month of December, the same month as the deaths, and he said, I think you're the right kind of guy that could take this, and that was a much smaller production company than the big ones. But I think the article led to the point of why was he going to Hollywood when he knows they weren't going to pick it up anyway? So I'm thinking in terms of big production houses, medium, and then small. And I think he was knowing he was going to zoom in and land at this level down here, but was going to give these guys a shot first, which didn't happen. And then he was settling in down here at the Jason Allen level. And if that didn't work, he could have gone independent or done it himself. But he had to give the options to try it to see if anyone would bite on this, like he called it, investor bait, to see if anyone was going to look at this. But so I don't think he's really two-faced at all. There was a comment too saying he wasn't in for the money, but he made a comment that he was going to be a millionaire by year's end. I think that could all be taken with a grain of salt. That was a fact. I think he would have been a millionaire at the end of the year, not necessarily that he was bragging that he wanted to become that. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, well, I mean, everything he told his dad is very key too, because first his dad is saying that while he's at Rainey's 5th birthday party, David tells him that he loves him, and he makes a very clear point to point this out and to point out that, but that was strange, almost as if that's something David wouldn't actually tell him. Like they didn't have that type of bond. And so it just kind of goes against the whole thought that David was distancing himself from his family. We don't really know what type of relationship he had with his family. This could have been going on for years. So we can't just think that, well, in these last months, then he just all of a sudden, didn't talk to anybody. He wasn't talking to people for a long time. And I think that's very, very clear. So go ahead.
Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, Corey, one of the last things that Corey does say in here is he talks about the pact between David and David's wife. Did you catch that in there?
I didn't. I looked at it a couple times, but I didn't see the pact mentioned.
It's one of the last things that he says. That the cops think that the wife played along because she bowed to David's untold emotional and psychological. What does that mean? Because
I did read that. I did have to read it twice because I think at the same time it wasn't alluding to a pact, but it alluded to the fact, I believe, that she was very submissive to him, and if this was the route he wanted to go, essentially holding himself up in the house to get this script done, she was going along with it. And I think and that way we don't want people to mistaken that for being a pact, which I think that maybe his mother first said. She said in the police report that, and I think this is where this all came from, this suicide pact. Kate Crowley made a comment in the police report by saying, I don't think that he would have done this unless there was some sort of agreement with his wife. And I think she just said that in passing. And I believe that the investigators, in talking with Sean Wright and Mason Hendricks down the road, suggested a pact was possibly in place, maybe just to get a gut feel for what their response was. And I think that's how that all came into play, because as of yet, we have seen no evidence to suggest a suicide pact at all. So I think Corey worded it, I think, good by not saying it was a pact, but worded it just vague enough that will lead some readers to think that maybe she went along with it. But I think that could leave room, like how you interpreted it, and you're a big follower of the case, and you potentially could have taken it the wrong way. Imagine
Yeah.
the newbies coming in. So I did had to read that twice. I did have to,
Okay.
because I thought, what exactly does that mean? But I think he meant it different than, and we know there was no suicide pact, but the fact that he said the words that she went along with it may lead readers to go down that avenue, which I
Well,
don't. That's my opinion, but I don't buy that there was anything to do with an agreement or a pact whatsoever. So
well, we don't even know if there was a suicide in this case. So of course, it's like, so anyone speculating on some type of a suicide pact is obviously speculating that David Crowley is guilty. So
correct.
it's like they're speculation on top of speculation. Then they get into why, and they add a third layer of speculation. And pretty soon, all you have is speculation built upon other theories that have led to nowhere, that have not led to any truth, that have not led to any facts. And we're still at point one, and that's why I think there's we're just scratching the surface of this whole case, just barely scratching it. I think this is going to be something, a case that is going to linger for many years, just
I
because how everything's played out.
I agree, because we're also dealing with many layers, I believe, as well. It's not just a clean cut kind of a who done it kind of a case. It's a lot. It's very in depth, I think, and we don't want to, what I would call, oversimplify a case like this. As far as what we believe, I think, in my opinion and yours, that the police and the investigators oversimplified, looked to what they saw, came to a conclusion, which I called it in the article, rushing to judgment, when there's a lot of complex things going on behind the scenes in a case like this. And like you said, if you start going after the pact, you're basing that on that there was a suicide. If you're assuming a suicide took place, it's a stretch, I think, when you don't have a suicide note, and you don't have fingerprints on a weapon, and you don't have a motive. Those are three things that you need for a suicide, I believe, to make it a slam dunk, and we don't have any of those things. So I'm more of a belief that it's still, in my book, the deaths of these three are undetermined.
Hmm.
There are a lot of folks who come on these justice pages and Twitter and some of the comments on Facebook just to say, where's your evidence? Where's your proof that it's a cover up? Where's your evidence, or where's there a proof that David didn't do this, that someone else did it? My answer, and it still is to this day, is we don't have evidence that anything took place. We don't have the suicide doesn't jive, because did someone murder them? I don't know. David's shotgun blast gunshot with the handgun was in the forehead like this. So uh,
Well, how do we know that if they didn't find any of his head either? How do they know where he was shot?
the only thing they know on the police report show that there's an exit wound in the back above his spine. Now, the back of his head was the exit hole. So they put two and two together and knew that the shot had to come from the front of the face somehow.
Okay.
But so that to me is odd when you're looking at a suicide, to shoot yourself in the forehead. But we don't have evidence yet, like you mentioned, of a suicide taking place. Now, is there evidence that someone came in and killed them? I don't believe so. I don't know if there ever will be that. Was it a hit? Was it any sort of combination of things? I think the point that you and I are trying to make, and the people on our page, is that we don't know, and we're just trying to get answers, as far as this should be an open, and it should be fairly easy. Now, with police looking at what what they have in ruling it a suicide, that's where I made the statement in that article, is that offends me as a citizen, that there wasn't any additional work done to come to that conclusion. Now it looks like that was what happened, but anyone jumping into the case is going to assume that. So did uh, tax the taxpayers and the tax provided funding of these police officers and detectives go to a full, wide ranging investigation to find the truth, or did they know the odds were not going to be on their side to find a truth one way or the other, and this was the easy play because there was no other alternatives that came into play, which I think also could very easily be the case.
Yeah, and that also, you also have to think, well, were the FBI involved? Was there any other people involved in this? So that's also been key too, because I've wondered why it's kind of taking Gummert so long to answer those questions, and I'm wondering who he has to get clearance from, because I'm guessing that he has to get clearance from someone, and maybe that someone might not let him answer those questions either.
Well, and that would be key as well, because many times that things that comments that I will say sometimes is what you don't hear sometimes gives you more information than what you do hear, and things like that with repeated questions back, we're not getting answers back. You could be right on the money. That could be a nice easy way of saying, you know what, we can't give it to you. Now, we haven't heard that anyone else was involved officially, but friends close to the case, at least two of them had said that both DHS and FBI have or are actively involved in this case. Do you think either of those two are, or the chances that those two agencies are involved in a case like this that's simply local?
I would hope not, but I didn't really see any reason for them to be involved in the Philip Marshall case either, but yet they were there. I mean, there was someone there. I'm not sure who exactly it was, but so I'm just wondering that same thing here. But I guess really it's really on us now. And I've talked about doing this, and I just haven't followed through on it yet, is contacting them and finding out. And I think that's the only way. So that's what I'm going to hopefully be able to do within the next day or two. So
would they, would local police like that be able to say, we can't comment because those other agencies are involved, or can they come out and say they're simply not involved, and we find out later that they are? So, what you might get here for us, Greg, is no answer just because of the fact that they're stuck. But
yeah, but they have to answer it in some type of way. Even by not giving us anything, it's still going to give us somewhere we can go. So it's just kind of, testing them and just seeing, well, okay, was there someone there? Was there not someone there? What did they say? Does it contradict what somebody else says? And I think that's kind of where, sadly, that's where we're basically at. I wouldn't say we're right back to square one, because we've come very, very far. And most of these theories, most of these things that we've been talking about, we've been able to really follow through with them and see how they line up with other people's theories. And I don't know about you, but the main thing that I'm finding out is many of the people who think that David Crowley is guilty, their stories are not adding up. They're all different. And that's been one of my biggest problems here, is that doesn't make sense. I mean, even if they were all lying, trying to tell the same lie, their stories would match up. But man, you have so many people with differing stories that it's just like, okay, there's something here. There's something here, and whatever the truth is, we're going to find that out.
well, let's say, just for devil's advocate, say David pulled this off just as it was stated in the narrative and the official narrative. Let's say that he
All
did do
right.
this. Now, the article also goes on to say in the City Pages article, it updates the folks out there who are unaware of what happened to the bodies. It does say that the
Mm.
Comel's body was sent to Texas to be buried. It says David's body was cremated and his remains are in the Twin Cities. And the next piece of information is crucial. It says Ranny, the 5-year-old daughter, her body was cremated and half of her ashes went with the father and half with the mother. Now, if you
Ooh.
were, let's say David did this, who would have their daughter buried in an urn with the killer? Who made that decision?
Well,
No,
they're
screw it.
not in the same urn, are they?
Well, they're buried together, maybe separate urns, same location,
Have to be separate urns for sure. But
separate urns.
yeah, but
But I
even
would,
to
if my murderer, I wouldn't want to have someone making the decision to be me buried next to my murderer if officially if the official statement was the murderer was my family member. Why on earth would that decision be made to be part of David's life at all? So for those who do buy the official story, that's a tough one to get their head around because that's that's tough to explain why you'd want to have the remains in here with a psychopathic psycho.
yeah, yeah, well, yeah, there's many times where there's like double speak where people will speak positively about David, but they also think that he killed his wife and killed his daughter. Okay, well that's it's a complete contradiction. I don't believe I don't see how he could have been both. But that's a whole nother thing, I guess. I don't understand. So the wife was buried. Why wasn't the daughter buried? Why wasn't Rainey buried? I
She
mean,
was cre- she was
and even the
cremated.
cremate, because wasn't David supposed to be a Christian or something? Because I know like you're not supposed to do that either as Christians. So
Well, in Christianity, it's becoming more popular. It's still, I wouldn't say it's the preferred way to burial, but I'm seeing more and more of it as far as going the route of cremation. Now, for a Muslim of Muslim faith that Komel's parents were, and I believe her sister still is, that's one thing you would never do is cremate yourself. So that her being buried makes sense that whether she was Christian or whether she was Muslim, because she never would have been cremated. David was cremated, um, maybe upon his wishes or without his wishes. I don't know who made that decision, but
yeah,
when I see cremation next to a suspicious death, it also raises the red flags as far as getting rid of the body and getting rid of evidence. So you know, but Ranny, it did say that she was cremated also. So there's no way then that she would have been Muslim if that would have been the case. So I think her remains now. If the family would have died in an automobile accident or any other way, just a normal accident, I could see her ashes being divvied up with both parents. But once again, it's hard to comprehend if you buy it and go along with the story that you would actually go through and have your body there remains next to your very own killer who died who killed you in a violent manner.
yeah. I mean, just thinking about it now, I do wonder if there was some type of problem that some of the family had with cremating this daughter, because I don't know, maybe it's not that big of a thing, but it just to me it seems, I don't know, it just seems weird. But
I think if you were to divvy up the remains, that's the only way, obviously you could do it because the body would have to go one place or the other. So that would make sense. But now we've got this angle of the killer being the father. So it's hard to explain that away. But cremation, it's very popular here in the Twin Cities, regardless of your religion, I believe. I think it's very
Well,
common.
I think that the Muslims, when they talk about that, I think they're kind of coming somewhat from the same source, you know, from some of parts of the scripture too. But so yeah, I don't know. I do wonder, is it cheaper too?
The whole process is cheaper, I believe, because you're not dealing with a large casket and a plot and a gravestone and whatever else there might be with it. So it will be a cheaper way to go, more inexpensive. That would be true. That would be the case. That's my opinion. I don't know. Um, the other thing I saw not mentioned in the article is the GoFundMe, the campaign there for the Komel's mother, Naila Alam, with her battling cancer and the when she didn't have insurance for that, and the fundraiser was raised looking for $6 million.
Oh yeah, yeah.
8,000, and then that was canceled out. So that wasn't, and there probably wasn't room for that. But I do believe, from a true investigation, that that's a key point in this case. Why
Well,
something
that
like that would be done and then swiftly stopped, and the whole thing surrounding that was quite odd. And I think that was all that I had for reading the article. That was my, looks like I had a total of six things. The people in the house, uh, Dan Crowley Jr. and David August, Danny August Mason, Mason Hendricks, David's buddy Adam, and Chris Klein, all in the house, either before or during the house was being cleaned, and before it was professional, before the professional cleaners were done, or perhaps some have speculated before they even started, they were in that house and in the attic rummaging through things. What is your take on, have the police adequately followed up with some of those leads? Have they done anything with that, or do they kind of let some of those anomalies slide?
Yeah, they haven't been clear on it. So I'm hoping that maybe Gummert will answer that question. That's one of the biggest ones. Why were these people there? If the was I mean, I don't know. It seems like the whole crime scene, I think on the very first page, they say that they came at about 12, but they had cleared the whole crime scene, whatever cleared means. They had cleared it by like 5, um, that same day. So when were these cleaners there? Were the cleaners there on the 18th through the 19th and the 20th? And I'm also wondering, what time did Chris Klein and Mason and whoever else went there too? When did they actually go there? They probably went. My guess is that they went at night, because I don't know if you would necessarily call in a suspicious person during the day, but it kind of makes more sense maybe if it was at day, because how does the neighbor who calls the cops, how did they get a good visual to say that, oh yeah, that's Chris Klein there, and then call the cops and then tell them that. So it's just like we've just been given so very, very little. It seems like we were given many of the reports when they first came in. And if you just go by that, most of those reports in the 94 pages were made on January 20th or January 22nd. That's when most of them, it seems like they were kind of done, and they were basically wrapping everything up. And they don't tell you anything. They don't find anything in that house that says why David is guilty. They don't find anything in the house that, for me, would even lead them to speculate on any type of a theory about who did what. I mean, come on. First of all, their hands are missing. So why do we assume that it's their hands, that it's David's hands that are writing this blood on this wall? When they went into that house, how long did it take them to figure out that it was David's hand writing in his wife's blood? I mean, that takes time. There's no way that they could have figured all of this out by the time that all of these news articles first came out. that were basically saying that police were treating this as a double murder suicide, and that was it. Everything was like, okay, that's where we're starting from. It wasn't, we're starting from what happened. That's where our group, our Facebook group, that's where I see us starting from, is what happened. And it can go off into many different ways, but we're not starting with the theory that David Crowley is innocent, and we're not starting with the theory that David Crowley is guilty. You know, there can still be justice served if he's guilty. And there can be justice served if he's not guilty too. That's just my view on it.
That's correct. That's a good way to put it. Yeah, it's a tough call. I'd rather go from the angle of innocent until proven guilty, and if there's
Absolutely.
evidence there that David did this, then show us the evidence. We'll all move on with their lives. If there's no evidence to show that he did it, I believe that you'd be left with the only option is to classifying this as undetermined death and throwing out all the information you can and just say that we don't know. We believe it's him who did it. There's no evidence to conclude that he did it, but let's throw it as label it as an undetermined and move on. You certainly can do that, but I don't know. I think
is it possible? Is it possible for them to go back later, even if it's 10, 20 years from now, and get to where we can get them to put that on record, to change it from a double murder suicide to undetermined? I mean, how realistic is that?
It's a stretch, but it can be done, and it has been done. A lot of times in a case like this, the people who think there's foul play involved will demand the case get reopened to get started again, and sometimes that's the harder thing to do, because you very rarely will anyone just start and open up a case again and open it up and redo the investigation and everything else. But if you just change the cause of death to undetermined, once that's done, it's easier then to get a case reopened to investigate in earnest. That's the next step. That's the next step. But what I would be interested in is not saying that the police did a good or a bad job or whatever kind of a job, because we're not here to point fingers. But it seems to me that the ruling of the deaths should be undetermined until we've got evidence to show that David did this. If he did it, show us the evidence now. We'll close it up. I've got better things to do with my time, and so do you. If there's no evidence that he did it, then why would you say then that why would they say that he did it? If you don't know, my point is, as far as starting the justice page, is you don't know. No one knows what happened here. If the investigators do, and they've got evidence to make this a slam dunk case, show us the evidence and we'll move on. So far, that hasn't been done. And in fact, it mentions in the article here with the last two paragraphs of the story, asking Officer Gumbert himself. And he says, I wish there was more evidence that we can show. I wish we could finalize and show people what happened to really prove this case. Basically saying he doesn't know himself. He doesn't know what else they can do to dig into finding this information. So what I'm saying is, and I think our group is under the persuasion of not admit it if you don't know it. It just kind of goes down that path. If you don't have the evidence, say we don't know, and we'll either keep looking into it or let the case go cold or whatever you need to do. But the fact that within 48 hours they slam dunked this case, and you've got writing on the wall written in blood that took days or weeks to do to find out that was Comel's blood, which it turned into, I believe, once they found it was her blood, they deduced the fact that she couldn't have been the one doing the writing. It must have been David, because it obviously wasn't Ranny. So I think they backed into it that way. And when you start doing an investigation for a crime this big, when you start backing into results that you hope to get out of it, I think the intent is wrong.
Yeah, and it's just crazy. There's nothing that they found there that leads me to think, why would they think that David Crowley's guilty? I mean, the guy, they didn't know if he was right-handed or left-handed. They really don't mention it. It's like they didn't even check that out. They didn't see, well, Was David right-handed or was he left-handed? Well, oh, we found the gun next to his left hand. He must have been left-handed. His right hand wasn't there. It's just crazy. I really don't understand it. I think their biggest problem that they're going to have is that Chris Klein story, simply because there's a bullet right above your head, man. How do you, not a bullet, but a bullet hole right above your head in the most crucial area, because this is not only the area where the bodies were found, but this is the area where that big, Allah thing was actually written. I mean, everything is here and you don't look up and see it. There's something really wrong here. There's really something else has to be going on here, and I'm not sure what it is.
The one thing that I did also see in the article that I forgot to mention earlier is the article does say, and it almost appears to be going out of its way to say, when the cops opened the door, the stench of the bodies knocked them over to something. So I've got two issues with that. Number one,
Okay.
remember they entered in the back through this rear slider, so they didn't open any door. They slid that back door open and just simply went in. They didn't grab a knob and open a door to enter the house, and there was no mention in that police audio of anyone gagging or mentioning anything about how horrendous the smell was. This seems to be now another thing that's been planted in the subsequent stories of how bad the smell was after we brought it up. That police audio shows those first officers on scene waiting for the catch pole to come for the dog, going into the house, and first words out of their mouth were, "Is the main level's clear?" And 20 seconds later, it says the basement has been cleared. No one has mentioned once, "Oh, grab me a bat mask," or "Oh, is it awful?" Or you don't hear any gagging reflexes on that audio, or no one even mentioning how bad it was. But yet the story came out on today's press release, painting a very vivid picture of how awful the stench was before the first officers on the scene grabbed that doorknob and opened up that front door. Well, they went in through the back door and there was no gagging going on for the smell at all. So that may have been something to, once again, paint a clear picture, but no one, as that audio is going to, anyone who's listened to the audio, let me put it this way. If you haven't been familiar with the story for the first time readers, they're going to think, boy, that smell really knocked them over. Now, remember, bodies decomposing in that state are going to be the worst in the first week, then the second week, and by the third week, somewhat, it could be almost non-existent. It's going to smell, but not that bad as compared to the first 2 weeks. So the level of the smell, that story has changed all through the past year as well, from nothing to smell to how bad it was, to the BCA people coming in were in full masks, in biohazard gear to clean that house, and to, so there's been stories that are not consistent, I think is the main word, is consistency. The other thing with Chris Klein being in that house, he made a report directly to police saying he was there with Dan Sr. and Dan Crowley Jr. Now, some have mentioned perhaps there was a typo in the police report and they got the senior and junior mixed up. Well, with the police, but the statement says Dan Sr. and Dan Jr., he was in the house with both of them. Now,
right, go ahead.
Dan Sr. says, I was never in that house with Chris Klein, ever.
Right.
So my question now to investigators, which I think was part of your 21 questions, is I'm assuming they follow up with that. That couldn't be taken too lightly to have someone outright lie to you during a murder investigation. But was Chris Klein brought in a third time? Was he questioned more heavily because of his inconsistencies, or do they just let it go? That to me is a very leading question by how they treated the lies in the testimony that was given in these statements. And I was in the attic, and I found we saw a bullet hole, and I was in the attic. Well, and then police find the second bullet fragment in late February, but then the cleaners are there the first week of the home, and a loose bullet fragment comes out from under the rug. So we want the other thing that's important to note for the first time readers to this article or following the case is that placed her there 3 different times and found evidence 3 different times. So was it a thorough investigation or not when you roll up a piece of carpeting and a bullet fragment falls out and they said, oh, I guess we missed this earlier, or there's a bullet hole above the ceiling, I guess we missed this earlier. That to me is not saying the investigators did a good or bad job. That's just a fact that it was just plain and simple missed. And that to me, I find that offensive that you've got investigators as a career to do this detective work, and you miss 2 things as blatant as that would be a slam dunk, I'm guessing. So what are your thoughts there? Greg, you still with us? I think he cut out. So that's kind of an overview of not pointing fingers of who's doing a right job and who's doing a wrong job. It's who's doing an inadequate job is I think the point of a case like this. That's all that I've got. We were going to be trying to jump in with Robert Elliott here as well, but I believe he's running late. Greg, it appears, has jumped off the call, and we will go from there. But this is a good update here, I think, from this article. Get a chance to read it. It's on citypages.com. It's entitled "The Strange and Tragic Demise of a Minnesota Filmmaker and His Family," entitled Final Cut. Today is March 23rd, 2016. Once again, this is Dan Hennon coming to you live with this update here on the David Crowley family deaths in the state of Minnesota. Good night.